So, you've seen the ads, right? The ones for ethical superfunds, all promising you can save the planet with your retirement money? Now, for anyone outside Australia, Super is just our mandatory retirement savings account that your boss pays into. But what if that warm, fuzzy, ethical promise comes with a pretty hefty price tag? In this explainer, we're going to cut through all that marketing fluff and look at the cold, hard numbers and what they actually mean for your future.
This quote? Wow. It really just gets right to the heart of the matter, doesn't it? The idea here is that the main thing being sold isn't a financial product, it's an emotional one. And that really sets the stage for taking a much closer look at this booming industry, especially with how it's targeting younger generations. So let's unpack that. And look, the appeal is obvious. I mean, who wouldn't want to feel like this money that just feels so abstract and far away can actually be a tool for good right now? It's a really powerful message, especially for Gen Z, who, let's be honest, are way more environmentally conscious than any generation that came before them.
And that's the core of the strategy right there. These funds are tapping into a genuine passion, a real desire to make a difference. The thing is, for a lot of young people, these ads are the very first time they've ever even thought about superannuation. So it frames the whole decision around morals, and in doing that, it kind of pushes the actual purpose of super, to fund your life when you stop working, way into the background.
Okay, but here's the kicker. This is the central conflict. While all the intentions might be good, the financial fallout can be, well, absolutely staggering. And we're not talking about a little bit of money here. We are talking about a life-altering amount.
Let's make this real for a second. 1%. Sounds like nothing, right? Almost insignificant. A tiny price to pay to feel good about your choices. But over a 40-year career, the magic of compound interest turns that tiny little percentage into a massive, massive number.
For the average person just starting their career, a fund that consistently underperforms by just 1% could mean you have $365,000 less when you retire. Let that sink in. And what's wild is that many of these heavily marketed ethical funds are underperforming by even more than that. This isn't just a number on a spreadsheet. It's a fundamental shift in your quality of life down the road.
So, what does a number like that actually buy you? It buys you dignity. It's the difference between being able to comfortably heat your home in winter versus being one of the 42% of elderly people who literally avoid turning on the heat because they can't afford the power bill. It's the difference between security and that constant, grinding fear of being vulnerable in your old age.
Now, what's really fascinating here is that this isn't just happening by accident. It turns out there's a real push from inside the industry to make it harder for you to even see this underperformance, to basically hide the truth behind a big wall of marketing.
So instead of, trying to improve their returns, there's a pretty big lobbying effort happening, and the goal isn't better environmental outcomes, it's to actually change the rules of the game so that their poor performance is essentially hidden from you.
And this is basically their playbook. First, you ring-fence these funds into their own little special category. What that does is it stops analysts, and it stops you, from making a direct apples-to-apples comparison against mainstream high-performing funds. And that lets the marketing story completely take over, because the actual data, the inconvenient numbers, are suddenly way harder to find.
So, how do we deal with this? Well, it's actually pretty simple. We just have to ignore all the marketing noise and focus on the one thing that truly matters for your retirement: the actual returns, the hard numbers.
At the end of the day, it all boils down to this. Are you making this decision based on an emotional sales pitch, or are you basing it on the reality of what your super is for? Look, feeling good about where your money is, that's great, but the most crucial thing is that you prioritize the hard data that actually leads to long-term growth and ultimately your financial security. All right, let's look at some real numbers. These were the top performers for moderate risk funds last year. But here's the catch. Looking at just 1 year can be really tricky. You see legal super at the top there, but our source points out this was a total outlier and came with super high fees, which just eat away at your money. A single year can be a fluke.
And this is exactly why taking a longer view is so important. When you look at performance over a 3-year period, it smooths out all the weird bumps and gives you a much more reliable picture of how a fund is actually being run. It tells you a lot more about their consistency and their strategy.
So when we stretch it out to that 3-year fee-adjusted view, a much clearer picture starts to form. You see the same names pop up again and again. Hostplus, Unisuper, and AusSuper are consistently at the top. The data also points to AwareSuper as another really strong competitor. These are the funds that deliver actual results, not just good-feeling promises.
And this all brings us to the final and most important takeaway. Choosing your super fund isn't just another piece of life admin you tick off a list. It is genuinely one of the biggest financial decisions you will ever make. The consequences can easily run into the hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. You have to remember what your super's real job is. Its purpose isn't to be some green gimmick. Its one and only job is to grow your money so it can fund the last few decades of your life, protecting you from poverty and letting you live with some dignity. It's there to grow your wealth, period.
So, I'll just leave you with this final thought. Take a really hard look at your own super fund. And don't just look at the slick branding or the nice promises, look at the hard, long-term numbers. And then ask yourself this: is my money really working for my future, or is it just working for someone else's marketing department?